Hello everyone, I am happy to meet you all through this video. In this video, we are going to discuss the role of T.S. Eliot as a critic. And the content is purely based on the book by B. Prasad, An Introduction to English Criticism. I am trying to make this video as a companion to B. Prasad's book because most of my students are finding it difficult to read the different phrases and the way Prasad has expressed. So I think video lesson will be helpful for them to understand the concepts more easily. T.S. Eliot is a remarkable writer and he has contributed a lot to literature. And as a critic, he has done a wonderful job by amalgamating science and literature, science and criticism. And he has introduced a lot of scientific concepts that help us and the critics to analyze a critical work or a work of art, and we can get the purpose of the work easily. So before going to see the concepts of T.S. Eliot, we are going to see what are the important critical works written by him. The important works are The Sacred Wood, Homage to John Dryden, for Lancelot Andrewes, Selected Essays, The Use of Poetry and the Use of Criticism, Elizabethan Essays, and Essays Ancient and Modern. All the critical works written by T.S. Eliot are either essays or lectures delivered by him on different occasions. And finally, all the works are collected and published as books together. So, as a critic, T.S. Eliot has different ideas and concepts. One important concept is his idea for orderliness. By the word orderliness, he feels the purpose. What is the purpose of a literary work? What is the purpose of writing? And where are the concepts come from? So, the orderliness means the concept and the purpose of a work. So, here he says, the art seeks its orderliness in life and criticism seeks its orderliness in art. So, as a critic, as a literary critic, a person will assess what? He just take a critical work or he just take a work of art and he will just analyze it and he will apply many concepts and he will bring his own critical work. So he relies on the work of art to write a critical work. So here he says that you have to first judge and you have to first identify the orderliness of a work, and then you have to go and analyze the work further. After analyzing, he may find some corrections in the taste, so he can bring the correction and make the work more useful to the readers. As we all know that English criticism is mainly divided into two categories, that is the classicism and the romanticism. So according to T.S. Eliot, he feels that classicism relies on the principle of alliance and the romanticism relies on the individual liberty. So he feels that we should go back to the past and we have to get some evidence to prove our point. If a writer is writing, if he only focuses on his individual liberty, then the work is invalid. He should bring the concepts and he should contribute something to the society. So to make his individual point more valid, he should show some evidence from the past. Actually, the past is not erased from the history or not erased from day-to-day life. The past is present in the present. So the writer has to bring the elements of the past and he has to give a different color to the present and in a way that which it will be appropriate for the present life. So this is how Eliot wants to focus on classicism more than romanticism. He supports individual liberty, but he also wants the writer or any work of art to produce as much as evidence it can to prove any idea of the writer. According to T.S. Eliot, the function of criticism is fact finding, that is, elucidation of a work. A critic should not just interpret the work, he has to analyze it and elucidate it to find the facts and present it to the readers. Eliot always relies on the facts. He doesn't want anybody to rely on the historical approach, and he doesn't want the critic to bring all the elements which was said by other critics of the past or anything. He just wants the critic to relate and analyze whether a point which is stated by the writer is valid and it is useful for the readers who are present in his age. So this is how he just wants the critic to be very clear before judging any work. And he says that a critic must think of two things before criticizing any work. A critic should have highly developed sense of fact before judging any work. And secondly, he has to use the two techniques, comparison and analysis. First, the critic must equip himself by educating himself with a lot of facts before reading or before criticizing a work. And then he has to compare the work with past traditions, and he has to analyze it, how this work of art will, when it comes to the reality, how the reader can relate it to the reality, and the work will be useful for the reader. To support his ideas on the function of criticism, T.S. Eliot, he also says that what is the purpose of a true criticism, and actually what a true criticism is. So he says that if a person is choosing to judge a work of art, and he says that he just reads a concept by Horace or Boyle, and he just reiterate the points of Horace and Boyle, and he says that as Horace told us that this point is valid, then the criticism is invalid. Because imagine yourself as a critic, and you are going to judge a work of art, and simply you are taking the work and you are reading it, and you are just going through some other criticism written by any critic of the past, and you're just quoting his words in your work, and you're telling like, yes, this person has said that this work is good, so I'm also telling that this work is good. And this is not a right criticism. As a critic, I should know and I should collect some facts regarding the work of art which I am going to judge. After that, I had to clearly elucidate, and like a biologist or a zoologist, I should sit and dissect each and every part of the work, and then I have to present it to my readers as a critical work. For example, university students, they are much familiar with the Narayan series guide and the Spark Notes and other websites which are available. So imagine all the students of literature, they are like critics when they write their examination. So simply, without reading a novel or without reading a drama, if you will just simply go and search for the summary which is available online, and then you will take the concepts and you will come and write. And here T.S. Eliot says that as a critic, this is not your right approach. You have to read the book by yourself, and you have to bring your own ideas and concepts, and you have to just evaluate and analyze the work and then present it to the readers. So I think this example will help you out to understand the concept of true criticism. After true criticism, now we are going to see the most easiest and important point of T.S. Eliot, the impersonality of poetry. When we say it's impersonality, we can say that, okay, it is like someone is getting deviated or someone is taken apart from the personal aspect. Here, T.S. Eliot just segregates the poet and the poem which he has written. As we know that Dr. Johnson goes with the historical approach, T.S. Eliot goes straight against Dr. Johnson. And he says that a poet, he has a scientific mind in which he can conceive any idea and he can produce that as a work of art. So any idea, I will get any idea, and that idea need not be my personal experience, or that idea need not be which is happening in my life. Imagine that I'm writing a love story, and you may think, after reading my work, you may think that okay, this must have happened in her life, so she could write beautiful work like this. But actually I may imagined, or I may have dreamt about something, or I may have heard the story from someone else and I have written it. So here Eliot says that the poetry is impersonal, and the voice which is spoken through the poetry must not be the voice of the poet himself. See, for example, I may listen to a story of my friend and I will just write the story in first person. And if you read the work in my name, you may think that the first person is me, but first person is someone else. So here Eliot says that there is no connection between the poet and the poetry. The work of art stands by itself, and whatever voice it gives, that are from different mediums and different ideas which came out from the scientific mind of the writer. So we need not go and search for a purpose, and we need not go and search for why the poet has written something like this. So that is actually unnecessary, and we have to look for the facts which we can relate to the current life which we are leading, so that the work will be more valid to the readers. After function of criticism, after true criticism, and after impersonality of poetry, now we are going to see the most interesting concepts of T.S. Eliot. He has proposed two important concepts. The one is objective correlative, and another one is dissociation of sensibility. Here objective correlative means, see, I will for example, I want to explain the importance of friendship, and to explain the importance of friendship, I will use a lot of objects in my work. For example, it's like giving away some gift to your friend, or saving your friend from an accident, or saving your friend's life, or being supportive to your friends. To just show my readers how friendship is important and why friendship is important, I'll use a lot of situations, I'll use a lot of objects, and I'll use a lot of personalities. So these are the objects which are correlated together to propose or to prove an idea. So I correlate a lot of objects and I will present this to my readers. So the objects which are used to propose certain idea is called as objective correlative. This concept we can if you want me to refer to a classical work, we can take the action of Lady Macbeth. Lady Macbeth, after killing King Duncan, she actually washes her hands frequently, and she does the action repeatedly. So that repeated action shows that she is disturbed by the act which she has done, and she is scared, and she was totally anxious. So to prove the idea, Shakespeare has used the washing of hand, the object, to correlate the idea. So this is how we can understand the concept of objective correlative. And the next concept is dissociation of sensibility. So dissociation of sensibility, what is sensibility before understanding dissociation of sensibility? See, sensibility is the ideas which we get in our mind, and the ideas which are proposed and written in the work. So here, before knowing dissociation of sensibility, we should know another concept, unification of sensibility. Unification means, as a writer, I will have a lot of ideas in my mind. So if I am successful in converting my ideas into words, and my readers are also getting the same idea, then that is called as unification of sensibility. And if I failed, I will have something in my mind, but the thing which I said will be totally inappropriate, and my readers will understand something else, and that is dissociation of sensibility. The failure of a writer to conceive the idea, to produce the idea which he has in his mind, two is writers is the dissociation of sensibility. In this video we have discussed a lot of concepts. I know it's heavy, but if you have Prasad's book in your hand and if you go through this, you will find it very easy. And this is my first video, I'm just trying, so I really appreciate your comments, and I'll try to make any improvements. Please leave your comments in the comment box, and if you have any doubt regarding the concept, you can post that also in the comment box. Thank you.